President Andrew Johnson now has a huge task of reconstructing the South. Lincoln had a plan, right? We talked about that. But it's not going to be Lincoln's the guy that's going to be doing it. It's going to be Andrew Johnson. So your overall topic is President Andrew Johnson and the reconstruction of the South. And the first subtopic, which is a short one, is major problems demanding solutions following the Civil War. Major problems demanding solutions following the Civil War. Now let me ask you a question. Did we ever get it figured out on what terms Confederate states were going to be readmitted to the Union? Was that ever finalized prior to Lincoln's assassination? No. So there's one major problem, is on what terms are we going to allow these Confederate states to come back to the Union? Because Lincoln was very, very lenient, because his goal was he wanted the nation back together. And he had some problems with radical Republicans, right, in that manner, which resulted in the Wade Davis bill, etc. So that was one major problem. On what terms should the Confederate States be readmitted to the Union? Now, we didn't really say this, but we gave you a little prelude to it. The second major problem is, how are we going to treat these Confederate leaders? Remember, we wouldn't let them have amnesty, right? But how are we going to treat them? We haven't made up our mind yet. What are we going to do for Robert E. Lee? How are we going to treat him? How are we going to treat these guys that left the Union government and started to work for the Confederate government? How are we going to treat those? Okay? And then we talked about this a little bit, but it hasn't been decided. What are we going to do to help these former slaves adjust to freedom in the United States? What are we going to do to help these former slaves adjust to freedom? And Thaddeus Stevens had a radical approach, and Charles Sumner had a real, good approach. We're going to educate them, we're going to train them because they're not used to these types of things. We're going to make sure they're equal. But we haven't decided any of this because Lincoln was assassinated. Okay? Now, these problems aren't going to be solved overnight. It's actually going to take 12 years to get this under control. And those 12 years will be from 1865 to 1876. 1865 to 1876. It's going to take 12 years, that period of time, to try to solve these difficult post-war problems. Now, what do we call this? Anybody know what we call this period of time in American history from 1865 to 1876? The Reconstruction. Yep, the Reconstruction. Okay. Now, I think we need to know a little bit about our new President of the United States before we get into it. What's this guy like? We don't know anything about him. So the next subtopic is Andrew Johnson, new President of the United States. Who is this guy that succeeded Abraham Lincoln to the presidency? Who was this guy? Now, doesn't Johnson kind of have two choices? He can agree with President Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction, or he can put his own into action, right? What do you think he chooses, Michaela? You got a 50-50 shot here, girl. To support his or to have his own. He did. He's very good. He chose to support Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction. He chose to support it, and he intended to put Lincoln's plan into action. But let's tell you a little bit about President Johnson before we see how he does. He was a self-educated man. Caitlin, what does that mean? Self-educated. That's very good. He had no formal schooling. He was a self-educated man. Did not have any formal schooling. Made himself what he was. Educated himself. He did a pretty good job. So President Johnson was a self-educated man. Didn't have any formal schooling. Now, he had a political career for a long time. And his political career began when he was elected mayor of his hometown community in eastern Tennessee. So his first political position is when he served as mayor of his hometown in eastern Tennessee. So his first political position was that of a city mayor. Now, we've talked enough about political aspirations. What do you think the next thing he served in more on a national level? What was he elected to next, you want to guess? What's that? The House of Representatives. So in 1843, Andrew Johnson was elected to the House of Representatives. And what state did he represent? Tennessee, because that's where he was from. So he's a mayor, then he jumps into kind of national politics, and becomes a member of the House of Representatives. Where they normally go from there? From House to Senate. But he took a little bump, and not a bad bump, but some people do this. So he went from a member of the House of Representatives from Tennessee, where he was elected in 1843, and in 1853 he was elected governor of Tennessee. So he didn't quite get to the Senate yet. He went from House of Representatives from Tennessee in 1843 to being elected governor in 1853. Then where did he go? The Senate. And he was elected to the United States Senate in 1857. So he has good political experience, right? His first one isn't, wasn't any big deal. He elected mayor of his community in eastern Tennessee. But in 1843, he was elected to the House of Representatives from Tennessee. 1853, he was elected governor of Tennessee. And then in 1857, he was elected to the United States Senate representing Tennessee. Now, he's a Southerner, is he not, Tennessee? Even though he was a Southerner, he was very loyal to the Union and spoke out against Tennessee's secession from the Union in 1861. That's probably why Lincoln had him in his administration, right? Wouldn't have certainly had a Confederate Southerner. But even though he was from Tennessee, Andrew Johnson was loyal to the Union, and he really spoke out against Tennessee seceding from the Union. Didn't like that. Now your next question might be, what did he think of President Lincoln, right? And this is what he said. You can write down what you want. He once said of President Lincoln, quote, "I voted against him. I spoke against him. I spent my money to defeat him. But I still love my country. I love the Constitution. And I intend to insist upon its guarantees." So what he's saying is that he didn't agree with everything Lincoln did. He voted against him. He spoke against him. He spent money to defeat him, winning elections. But he loved his country, he loves the Constitution, and he intended to insist upon its guarantees. He thought Lincoln was doing the right thing as far as Reconstruction and chose to follow his lead. Well, as I mentioned, the reason he was given the vice presidential nomination in 1860 for the Republican Party is because he was a loyalist. Although he was a Southerner, he was loyal to the Union, and he had very good political experience, did he not? House, governorship, Senate, and that's how he got in there. Now, this is where it gets a little crazy, and we talk about our next subtopic, which is opposition to President Andrew Johnson. How are Northerners really going to look at Johnson when he takes over the presidency? They're going to look at him as a traitor. No, not a traitor, because he was what? Southerner. Yeah, despite his loyalties, these people look at him as a Southerner. So he doesn't have a ton of support, and he's going to face some serious opposition from Northerners, but especially what group of Northerners? The radical, very good, Emily, the radical Republicans are going to be real hard on Andrew Johnson. Now, did they believe the Lincoln plan was too soft on the South? Yeah, so obviously they're going to believe that the Johnson plan is too soft, because what's Johnson doing? Following Lincoln's lead, right? Okay? Now, Congress is kind of an arrogant bunch at this time, especially the radical Republicans, and they believe that they should have the power to deal with restoring these Confederate states, not the president. So you got a conflict in power between the President of the United States, who the Northerners don't even see as a fit for the presidency, frankly, and the Congress, who really want the power to deal with restoring the Union. So, these radical Republicans in Congress have to outnumber, don't they, the moderate Republicans in Congress to make it work? In other words, are there more radical Republicans in Congress or moderate Republicans? Well, this time in history, there were more radical Republicans than moderate Republicans. So the radical Republicans are going to have the power. And they're basically, what they want to do is punish the South. That's what the radical Republicans want to do. Did Thaddeus Stevens really want to punish the South? That was his whole thing. Charles Sumner had a little bit of logistics to him where he was more concentrating on what we're going to do with the freed slaves. But in the end, do you think that Charles Sumner, kind of in the back of his mind, wanted to kind of punish the South? Sure he did. So these radical Republicans are more into punishing the South than they are fixing anything. So the radical Republicans were very, very determined to defeat Andrew Johnson's plan for Reconstruction, which also was Lincoln's plan. So they're out to defeat him. So you're going to see a lot of opposition to President Andrew Johnson during the time he serves as president. So, how are you going to make things miserable for President Johnson? You're going to go to work against him. And that's the next subtopic, which is the Northern Controlled Congress goes to work. Are there any Southerners saying Congress right now? They're just coming off a Civil War defeat. Not at all. So the whole Congress is controlled by the North. And they're going to go to work to ensure that Johnson's philosophy on Reconstruction will not happen, and their philosophy on Reconstruction will happen. Can you picture that in your mind? So they're going to do everything they can to oppose anything President Johnson wants to do on Reconstruction. They're going to control everything, and they're going to make sure that it's a miserable situation for the president. And by doing this, they passed several acts through Congress. Some good, some bad. But you got to think at the time. And the first one I thought was pretty good. Happened in April of 1866, and what was it called? What was it called? The Civil Rights Act. Okay? April of 1866, Congress passed what we know as the Civil Rights Act. And what did it do? It simply granted both citizenship and equality to who? Come on. Blacks. Yeah. In April of 1866, the Civil Rights Act granted citizenship and equality to all blacks. Does that mean women also? Yes. The voting issue will be different. They gave them citizenship and equality. Now, when a law goes through Congress, the president does what? Either gives him his rubber stamp okay, or he vetoes it. Well, President Johnson vetoed this new law. He thought it was unconstitutional, so this law will be passed over President Johnson's veto, which is always a bad thing when you have that conflict. I think he vetoed it just because he didn't like it, because really, is that a bad law to have? But he's a what? Southerner. So he's still got Southern philosophy. Okay? All right. The next piece of legislation that's passed during this time happens in 1868. You should certainly know this. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Now this kind of goes back to thinking what we talked about before. Now, basically, the Civil Rights Act said that all blacks earn citizenship and what? Equality. First thing the 14th Amendment of the Constitution states is that all people, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, all people in the United States are citizens of the United States. That's what the 14th Amendment states. That all people that live in the United States are citizens of the United States. Now this is kind of interesting because you girls will not like this. But the 14th Amendment to the Constitution also stated that all male citizens, black and white, had what? The right to vote. And that upset white women who thought they should have the right to vote before black men. So that becomes a little controversial, and we'll talk about that. So the second thing the 14th Amendment to the Constitution states is that all male citizens, black or white, would be allowed to vote. Another thing the 14th Amendment stated, and we talked about this, is each southern state would have to ratify their Constitution stating that they agreed that all people of the United States were citizens of the United States and that all male citizens, both black and white, could vote. Remember we talked about that? They had to put that in their state constitutions if they wanted to be readmitted into the Union. So, as a result of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, in order for a southern state to get back into the Union, they had to ratify a constitutional amendment. In other words, they had to go to their state constitution and put an amendment to that stating that they recognized that all people were citizens and that all males, black and white, could vote. Now, it caused bitter feelings, especially among women, who really believed that a black man not so necessarily shouldn't get the right to vote. They weren't saying black men shouldn't vote. They just had a hard time with white women not voting. I don't think they had a lot of trouble with black women not voting at the time. Okay? So that became really controversial. And probably one of the most outspoken women's rights leaders that talked about this was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And she stated that the 14th Amendment would cause ill feelings between black men and white women forever. That was her proclamation. So one of the most outspoken women's rights leaders against the 14th Amendment was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And she stated that if you pass this, we'll have continual ill feelings forever between black men and white women. Well, guess who didn't think much of this new law? Besides white women. President Johnson. He adamantly opposed the 14th Amendment. Well, at this point, the radical Republicans set their sights on trying somehow to remove President Johnson from office. How do you do that? How do you remove a president from office? You impeach him. Now, let's get this clear before we get to it. When you impeach a president, that doesn't mean you throw him out of office. That means that you are accused of high crimes and misdemeanors and you're accused of something. So if you're impeached, you still go to trial, and who is the jury, so to speak? Anybody know? Who votes on whether you're kicked out or not? The Senate. Very good. So if you're impeached, that means that you're accused of high crimes. You go on trial as president, and then all members of the Senate vote yea or nay, and majority rules. Okay? Keep that in mind. Well, as the radical Republicans in Congress set their sights on trying to remove President Johnson, they start to first defame him. What does that mean? Say things about him that probably aren't true. Okay? Defame him. Okay? Now I'll give you a couple examples of things they accused him of as president to defame him. Okay? First of all, they accused him of being a drunkard in office. The radical Republicans in Congress accused President Johnson of being a drunkard in office. They also accused him of having a harem. What's a harem? A group? A harem of loose women in the White House. So not only was he a drunkard in office, according to the radical Republicans, they also accused him of having a harem, which would be a group of loose women in the White House. Well, was that enough to get him removed from office, kids? No. So in order to ensure their plan to get him out, they're going to have to pass a new law that somehow he'll screw up and violate, so they have justification to kick him out of office. And that law will go down in history as the Tenure of Office Act of 1867. This is a law that Congress is going to pass to try to set up President Johnson, thinking that there's a way he can violate that so they can impeach him and take him to trial. Because they're pretty sure wouldn't you be pretty sure if you got to trial with this Senate and how we have it now, that maybe you'd have enough votes to get him out of there? Because who controls the Senate? The radical Republicans, okay? Pretty good plan. So the 10-year of office act of 1867 is going to be passed to basically set up the president so they can have a reason to remove him. Now, here's what the act said. It sounds stupid, but you think about it. The 10-year of office act of 1867 required that the president get the approval of the Senate before he could remove any members of his cabinet. In other words, he could not fire a cabinet member unless the Senate approved it. Okay, now this will make sense in a minute. So the 10-year of office act of 1867 stated that the President of the United States could only fire a member of his cabinet with whose permission? Senate's. Now, do you know what tenure means? Teachers can get tenure. Okay, tenure means that on a teacher's fourth contract, they have continuing contracts where it makes them harder to get fired. So prior to tenure, you don't have to give any cause. You know what, Caitlin's a bad teacher, we'll fire her. But if Caitlin gets tenure, then all of a sudden you have to justify her firing much more. Does that make sense? So tenure is a protection. Tenure of Office Act, who are they protecting? Who are they protecting by passing this? Members of Lincoln's cabinet, because they know that Lincoln can't stand one, that Johnson can't stand one, and what's he getting ready to do? If he can't stand somebody in your cabinet, what are you going to do? Fire him. So they know this. They know that there's one cabinet member that Johnson cannot stand, a holdover from the Lincoln cabinet, and they knew he was so mad at him